Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever the case may be, wherever you're tuning in from, to another episode of Red Fellas. Hope you're all doing very, very well. We welcome you all. We have so much to get through. As we discuss, as the title says, evolution or revolution. Don't ask who came out with that, but it's good. I like it. You see who's joining me. The names are there, the faces are there. I'm not even going to go and ask them how they're doing because we've got so much to get through. Cab's on his way as well. But lads and lasses, welcome. As we discuss our lighthouse about to leave us, are we about to be plunged into darkness without our lighthouse? Or will we come out shining? All will be revealed today as we go through, of course, so much drama unfolding. I'll come to Dan first, just when he thinks he's had enough talking about it on Redmen every single day. Dan, we asked for a huge summer. We thought we're going to get a big summer. I think majority of us were hoping it was in terms of incomings. But this level of outgoings, the four that we know of that we knew out of contract, add to that looks like another two major outgoings. Who's the third one? There was another one who's gone so far already. Four already gone. Another two pending, as the case may be or not. We'll discuss. Did you anticipate this much of upheaval?
No, not at all. This wasn't part of the plan, was it? I don't think for anyone. I think this has caught everybody off guard, really, Liverpool included in many senses, to be honest with you. And that in itself creates a problem, especially on the eve of the pre-season. And we all know how much Klopp likes to have a settled squad and sort of things sort of in place and moving along smoothly. And that's been absolutely blown apart, really, in the last 7 days by what we've seen from Saudi. So I certainly didn't expect it. That big summer rebuild that we all knew we needed and wanted, that just got a whole lot bigger. And it's one of them, like when I first sort of realised and it dawned on me just how pivotal this now was and such a sea change this is going to be, I was a little bit sort of taken aback, a little bit like, wow, like I didn't want this almost. Like this wasn't the rebuild that I wanted. I wanted to see some change, but I wanted Fabinho and Henderson to almost be a part of it, sort of moving forwards. But now I've sort of come to terms with it. I've spoken about it for the last 3-4 days. Now I'm at the other end and I can start to get excited about it again. The options that we're probably going to talk about didn't overly excite me, if I'm going to be dead honest about it. But listen, we are where we are now, and I think it's a big old job. All of a sudden, it looked like we were getting somewhere with Szoboszlai and McAllister. It felt like we were settling again, and we were sort of the pathway was clear. And now, like I say, absolute grenade launched into the middle of it.
Steve, Dan's spot on. I think we all anticipated lots of change in and out, but by my estimation, we'll probably get into sort of the numbers actually, but by my estimation, 4 gone, 2 pretty much I'd say on the verge of, and we anticipate further. I don't think the outgoings will stop there. We already discussed the Kelleher situation, the Phillips situation, possibly Simicast situation developing there. You're looking at maybe 7-8 outgoings, and I think we can all safely say all minimum first team squad players, if not 3 or 4 first teamers in there.
Yeah, I think we talk about we don't do championship manager sort of summers, do we? But it seems we are at the moment. You can make
Klopp and Co said, "Hold my drink."
Well, exactly, and you look at the names who are going. They're names that our fan base across all sort of capacities of social media could have written for you throughout the season with the criticism and the comments and the negativity around those players. So I don't think there was too much sleep lost over that. It's unprecedented. I'll take you back how unprecedented it is. Go back right the way to the year we signed Kenny Dalglish. We signed Kenny Dalglish and Graham Souness in the summer and then in January. We don't do things like 7 or 8 players going in and 7 or 8 players coming out. It's unprecedented. It's new territory for us as a fan. It feels really weird because I said on this show many times, although Fabinho is not the player he was when we won the league, to be a good 6, you've got to have 2 good 8s either side of you. And you could honestly say he didn't have that last season. So I was kind of looking forward to see if there was a little bit of renaissance in Fabinho, to see if he could improve, see if having better players around him and a better system that looks after the ball in a more progressive way, with the 2 lads we've signed playing slightly further up the pitch. But I guess we're not going to see that. And for him, it's a good move, big money, obviously. And for Liverpool, it gives us options. But we're back where we kind of were a month ago, where we now need 2 more midfielders. Where do they come from? So every time something changes, every time we sell somebody, the dynamics of where we need to be to get to the start of the season, where we feel we can compete for whatever the expectations are within the club, we have to go and find 2 more midfielders now. And this Andre guy maybe is the understudy to a bigger name that comes in as well. I think that's where we are. And as Stan says, it was a bit daunting, then it becomes exciting, then it becomes daunting again.
Yeah.
It's we just don't do this, but here we are doing this.
I like this comment from Anfield Hustle. Not the rebuild we wanted, but I think the real rebuild we needed. Con, I think I'm with Dan when he says that everything seemed under control first couple of weeks. We've got the signings in. Everything seemed to be progressing nicely. We knew we may have a lull where we look at outgoings and then assess and attack the market again near the end and get the other, possibly 2 more signings, another midfielder, another centre back after the 2 that we got. And I think majority of us, the non-FIFA playing merchants, would have been happy with that. But now, to me, and I want to get all of your opinions on this, to me now, I think this seems a bit of not turmoil, but I think there's a, is there panic? Is there, because this was no way forecast. There was no way we anticipated Thiago possibly being the only senior midfield player left at the end of this window.
Yeah, no, I think I'd agree with that, Grizz. But I guess, like, circumstances change. And from Liverpool's point of view, if you're getting the money back for Fabinho right now, and he's not going to get any, you're not going to get any more money for Fabinho. This is the absolute maximum you're going to get for him. It's very easy for the club to bite the hand off for that, because ultimately you can say what you want about Renaissance. Possibly, I get that. But for me, it was very obvious. It was rotational at best this season. His legs couldn't cope with consistent matches. If you want to compete in this league, you've got the best DM in the world. Rodri plays every match, right? And even below that, there's other players. If you want to compete, you want to get back in top four again, you're going to need that. So I think that was probably in the back of the club's mind anyway. But I agree, they probably thought we'll go with Fabinho this season and, maybe get a Lavia in, and they can get rotational. But when you get offered that money and you don't know how long the Saudi theme is happening right now, it could be next 10 years, it could be just after 2 years. I think they saw opportunity, and I completely understand that. For me, I'm not as nervous, to be honest, because I don't have short memory. I know the amount of times me and Grizz would agree on how poor Fabinho's performances were last year. So I think when you can still get that money following that season, you take it, and you have confidence that you can recruit someone to replace him. Again, we're forgetting Bajcetic was literally playing games because his form was that poor last year. I don't know why we're forgetting this. So I feel like they're probably going to take a risk. I agree. But they're probably going to back themselves that they'll get someone in. And again, I feel if you're going to do it, right now is the right time. Because it's a rebuild. We keep saying we want a rebuild. Then when we do it, what's Twitter? We're in panic. Oh my God, here we go. This is crazy. Well, what do you want? Because you can't sit on the fence. You need to choose one way or the other. And I'm quite happy with that. I do understand the senior players' point of view. That actually be very interesting if we knew this was going to come, if we'd actually have let Milner go, or we just kept Milner in the similar sort of position he was in, because we all agreed Henderson would have been that guy this season. But, that's looking like it's not going to be the case. So I understand the feelings towards that. But for me, I just think if you're in business, you can't turn that money down, because you believe, Grizz, you said it yourself. I think that the recruitment will have full belief that they can get a replacement in with the money they've got plus the fee that comes in.
Dan, people probably thinking they're going to tune in and see a beaming, smiling Grizz because he's been vindicated about Fabinho, and I've been moaning. I'm his biggest critic last season. But listen, we need to sometimes, not sometimes, we should always appreciate greatness. And look, Flacco turned Slacco last season, maybe, but his overall time, he was majestic, he was magnificent, and he was so crucial. But again, what Conroy's saying, 40 million after buying him for 45 and then probably rinsing him and using him to the absolute maximum and then selling him again. That is probably, if Carlsberg made transfers, that is how you do a transfer, right?
Yeah, yes and no.
Go on.
For me, first and foremost, he's been absolutely magnificent for us, pretty much since day one, to be honest with you. We always talk about Virgil van Dijk and Alisson as being transformational. Fabinho, not at the same level, but absolutely imperative to what we've done. Some absolute monster performances in there as well along the way. So yeah, absolutely outstanding Liverpool career. Miles off it last season, absolutely miles off it. Our midfield department to a man was miles off it last season, apart from 10 games of Curtis Jones at the back end of the season, a little bit Harvey Elliott early doors, and Stefan Bajcetic for his little cameos. The Bajcetic thing that Conroy mentioned, I've got huge reservations about backing him to the hilt as a 6. I actually preferred him in an 8, to be honest with you.
Well, just to clarify, Dan, I'm not saying he's that guy. It was just a point to say that's what
fair enough. Yeah, I think he's definitely an option, by the way, 100%, because he's an outstanding talent. I know there's still some concerns about the injury that he picked up back in the season as well. So, for me, the business side of things in terms of getting 40 million, I think if you were selling Fabinho in the European market, yes, 40 million. But given the fact that this wasn't part of our plan, for me, Fabinho was part of our plan for next year. So Saudi have basically turned up and said, oh, by the way, your first choice 6, we're just going to take him off you. I personally would have wanted more money for him than 40 million, given the fact that Saudi clubs, given the fact that we don't need to sell him. Like you mentioned a minute ago, Grace, like Thiago could be our only senior defender, midfielder rather. I actually think Thiago should have been the first one.
If we done a poll, Thiago, Fabinho, Henderson, who will be probably gone by the end of it, who will be remain? I think everyone would have said, right, Henderson, because we don't think anyone's going to come in for Henderson at this age. Right, exactly. Fabinho, he's crucial to the plan despite having an off season, but we think he might be crucial to the plan. And Thiago, he's just not playing enough, and he's the glamour name that a new league would look for.
Yeah, and biggest wages, injury prone, found the year of his deal. Those 3 things make him the easy option. I actually think he's the best midfielder out of all 3 of them, but the things I've just mentioned make him the option. So I would like to have got more money for Fabinho because we have to go and replace him. We have to go and replace our first choice 6 now. We can't get.
I know what you mean by that, because it's how much he's worth to us right now, because he's our only DM, and we held him in that high esteem that we didn't want to get rid of him. Jurgen Klopp had already, I think, sort of assigned himself to assign the role for him, and then bringing in a younger understudy, as we're going to go on to discuss. But now, Steve, that changes everything, I think. Or does it, in your opinion? Because many are saying, no need to panic, because I don't know. Why no panic? Are you panicking? I'm not panicking. I'm excited like Conroy. I wanted a flashing out, but I didn't want it in one window. I wanted this flashing out done over the last 2-3 windows. And I think we're paying for the non-activity or the non-activeness especially in the central midfield area. Is there any panic now? Should we be worried about going into possibly a season with no senior DM?
Sound like Dan here, yes and no. No, because when you push Trent into midfield, you've got almost a double pivot if he sits deep, and you don't need a specialised 6 to play a double pivot, because McAllister was playing in a double pivot last year. So it's not like we don't have players that can do it. So that brings Bajcetic back into the mix. Not every game, but certainly he'll play around the games. We have to remember, guys, he was a centre-back. We pushed him into midfield. So this idea that we can push him on and he can be an 8, And then because he scores a goal against West Ham, there's people who think he can play even further forward than that. His grounding, his education as a footballer is a defensive one. So at 18, we shouldn't be judging footballers on what they are at 18 because we don't know. What we've seen is a glimpse of what he might be. But there's a long road to go down before he gets there. And at 18, you can't. I do agree with the fact you can't pin your hopes of your midfield on an 18-year-old. It's not fair. It's too much responsibility. I've seen it bandied around, and I agree. I think Paul Machin said it that if we're selling Fabinho and Henderson goes out the door, then your Lavia is not your man to sit at the base of your midfield. You've got to go and get a seasoned footballer who understands all of the complexities of playing in that role. And here's the thing: we all said too much pressure on Bajcetic as an 18-year-old to play in midfield. Yet there's a whole raft of people out there who want to go and buy a 19-year-old to do it. It's exactly the same scenario. Playing at the base of a midfield for Southampton is not the same as playing at the base of a midfield for Liverpool, with better players around you who ask more of you than Southampton players ever would. So what a 19-year-old can do to help Mo Salah is very different to what a 26, 27-year-old seasoned deep-lying playmaker as opposed to a 6 or a DM is what I'm looking at. Our shape and our new system changes the dynamic of who needs to sit. And if we'd gone 4-3-3, like for like what we've seen over the years, then you'd be looking at it going, you've absolutely got to go and buy the best number 6. 60, 70, 80 million will get you if you add the Fabinho money to what we've already got. Because we push Trent in there, that changes the dynamic of that a little bit. We need a disciplined player. We need an educated, responsible player to play in there, not necessarily for me a specialist 6. That opens up the funnel of the players you can get because the best number 6s in the world are not available. So we're always going to be looking at who can we make into the next best number 6 in the world. But you can change that by going buying a dynamic footballer that can do you a job in there. And this is the thing. People thought Kefram Turam could be educated to play in that position. I don't think that would have suited him. And then Kone goes and gets quite a bad knee injury. So you kind of have to rethink it. But I don't think we're dependent on buying a specialist 6 per se.
No, I agree with you. I think we've got a history and very recent history of using certain players' attributes and profiles and then utilizing them into the system that we think can work for us. We've done it with Bobby. We've done it with Fabinho. We've done it with so many numerous players. So, yeah, I wouldn't be so sure that we're going to buy a number 6 per se, but definitely and most certainly a midfielder that has the attributes, especially the physical attributes. Because Conroy, I've been screaming out, we need height. We need height. We need physical power. We can't afford to be bullied like we did last season. So many games was pathetic to watch how we were outfought and basically just bigger teams bullying us. We started off the summer by buying a 5'8" playmaker in terms of McAllister. That didn't bode too well, but I thought, okay, we were linked with Kefren Turam, 6'4", so Bozolai, 6'1". Okay, we're getting there. Now Romeo Lavia is very strongly linked, 5'9", 5'8" again. Is that a worry? Do you think we will care about size and power in terms of the third midfielder? If we buy a third midfielder, because some are suggesting we may not. We may just go for the one midfielder who's a definite starter as opposed to Lavia, who's supposed to be sort of groomed into the role. How would you go about it? Would you buy the one, or would you buy an understudy and then a one more season pro? And I'm going to dispute and I'm going to argue with Steve about his point about there's not many great 6s about. I'm going to have a big row about that because we need to show ambition. I'm going to ask you, look, why aren't we going to show ambition if this is the time to show it? But that's another question. Sorry, I've asked you about 6.
I'll answer the first one. So with regard to height specifically, Grizz, I think, to be fair, I hear what you're saying, but I think you probably get away with that.
Okay, 5'11". Sorry, guys. 5'8", 5'11", same thing. What's 3 inches? Pause.
Yeah, but what I mean is, like, I think power and, like, you talk about the ability to win the ball back and actually, especially in transition and just in those battling games, you need that absolutely. And I think, to be fair to Lavia, he has showed potential for that as well. It does seem like he has got a ceiling where he's got that bit about his game, and he can maybe hit a next level when it comes to, you talk about ability to start attacks, play through balls. You see what Rodri does at City now. Not comparing everything to that, but I understand why there's so much activity around that player, like, because you can see the potential there at such a young age to show like what he can do right now. There'll be a lot of teams think he could really hit. And let's not act like this came out of nowhere. I think even when Southampton signed him, there was a lot of rumours that a lot of people thought this Lavia could be the next big thing in that position in the next 6 years. But for me, I'm okay with Lavia for that, because I think if I look at the best one right now, and I'm not going to jump the gun on conversation, Grizz, but when you're talking about that one, significant player we can get in who maybe will have changed their tune with the Fabinho money, we're going to get someone in right now who could, a seasoned midfielder, as Dan and Steve said. Honestly, straight away, I'm just thinking there's only one player in my mind who this is that guy. But we're not going to get him. I know that, because the money's going to be too much. But Caicedo would be that guy, 100%. But that kind of goes against the height thing. But I think he's obviously shown he's got the physical ability to do that in that situation. So with those two players who I rate highly, especially Caicedo, I'm okay with height specifically, Grizz, but you need that ability to be powerful in that area, especially if you've got Trent in the box midfield too. Like, Trent obviously wants to be that creator, wants to do that, but you need to protect him as well, because with certain games, like you saw with Aston Villa, that they'll target that. So we need to be adapted at dealing with that. So for me, I would say Caicedo, and a little bit of me is just like, just break the bank, because I think this guy is a game changer. People probably disagree with that, but I just think, as we're describing who we need, that in my mind, that is the one, but it's not going to happen, unfortunately.
Just a couple of comments I want to read out. Dan Club is a legend. Great to see him on this week. We agree with everything that you've said there, Mac. And I really agree with Johnny. He says, why would you listen to the show and not hit the like? Lazy and arrogant. There's over 650, coming up to 650 of you, yeah? And apparently not even 100 likes, which is quite disgraceful. Why are you not worried and panicking? Just hit that like button. We'll relax. We've got you. Jurgen Klopp has this. He does have this, Dan. He does have it. I believe, and we've said so many times, listen, there's no better man to be in charge of the rebuild that we'd want, Jurgen Klopp, because he understands the fabric. He understands everything that we're going through as fans as well now. And I've often said in recent weeks, and even the last couple of weeks, or not, last month or so, I was very adamant that I've noticed, and maybe call me a body language expert or whatever, shower me with praises. But I kind of guessed, and I was assuming, just by listening to him and reading everything he's saying, he's learned his lessons. I think he's going to be ruthless, and I think he knows what he needs and what he wants to do. And almost, Dan, and which is nothing wrong with it, I think he's reflected and probably thought he should have done a few things differently. Do you notice that about him? Do you see a difference in outlook and moving forward with him?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I nearly sort of referenced it earlier on in terms of like, there's nobody I'd rather have. It almost goes without saying. That's why I kind of stopped myself, to be honest with you. There's nobody I'd rather have at the helm for whatever happens this summer, whether it been the rebuild we first imagined we'd be having, or this new look crazy rebuild that looks like we're going to be forced into. It's still it's still Jurgen Klopp, of course. It's going to be fascinating. He still looks very upbeat in Germany, quite frankly. I hopefully will be speaking to him on Wednesday in Germany when I head out there, so that'll be exciting.
Wow.
Hopefully he's upbeat when I speak to him as well. But yeah, he looks happy. He's got a very sort of calm, he feels like he's in control again, and that's despite what's gone on over the past few days. But it is going to be fascinating to see how he deals with this situation. He's kind of dealt with the Fabinho side of it by not taking him on the plane with him, hasn't he? And how he deals with the Henderson thing is going to be interesting too. So, yeah, I think Jurgen Klopp strikes me as a man who has learned some lessons, and he's not afraid to sort of come out and say, I might have made mistakes in the past. He holds himself accountable for what he's done. And I think we, to a man, woman and child, have said for a long time, he got last summer. He was the one, let's not forget, sort of this time last year, came out and said, oh, no, we don't need a midfielder. Tell me what we need. We've got X, Y, Z, etc. Turns out we definitely
I dare you to remind him of that. If you get the honor and pleasure, I bet you bottle it.
If I get two questions and the first one goes well, then I might
don't ask him that. No, don't waste one of those precious questions on winding him up, possibly.
Yeah, exactly.
But he has to, Steve. He has to. He's got some. I guess it segues into probably equally, or if not more, the significant talking point of the week. He had a massive decision to make with Fabinho, and as I said, by all accounts, he didn't ask him to stay. Fabinho wanted out, no problem. Get us. This is what we want, and off you go, son. Jordan, Brian Henderson. Wow, quite the situation where your captain, your skipper, your vice captain in the summer, and your main DM, pretty much all gone, or is pretty much all lost with Jordan Henderson. So a couple of questions. How do you tackle the situation if you're Jurgen Klopp and Jordan Henderson has agreed a deal, personal deal? And B, if he doesn't end up going, if the Saudi club are unable to raise any form of transfer funds, how do you integrate him back? Or do you? I've been scratching my bald head for a few days now.
I don't think there's a cancel culture in and around the club. So I think, first of all, if he does stay, it will be difficult. I can't see how he can remain club captain, having publicly announced that he's a desire to play somewhere else. Your captain has to be bolted onto your plan and know exactly what you want to do and be part of that. It's really, really difficult. It feels like publicly the announcement was made that he wanted to leave before he fully understood the dynamics of the move and the lack of money that Al Attifaq have got in terms of paying for him. So he's put himself in a really difficult position. He's publicly stated he wants to be part of a different project. It's probably been sold the world by Steven Gerrard in terms of what comes next at the end of his career and stuff like that. And I get that. He obviously has looked at the squad in the same way that we had and thought, well, I'm behind this one. If we all went around the room now, we'd get around 1.5 times, I think, before we get to Henderson in terms of where did he fit in the midfield for next season. He's not stupid. He knows that. So what does next year look like for him? A lot of watching football. He's behind pretty much all of the midfield, and Harvey Elliott would tell you he's in front of Jordan Henderson if you asked him. So it doesn't look great for him in terms of game time, and he just wants to play football. So there's nothing wrong with that. The difficulty is if this doesn't go through, and I think the club will find a way to facilitate it because harmony and the group being close is a big thing for Klopp and Linders. Really, really important to have one person kind of going against the tide. But that's that much gravitas and that much influence in the club is a really bad idea. So I think for the best interests of everybody, Jordan's not going to play a lot of football for Liverpool. He wants to go and do something else for an absolute king's ransom every week. I think the club will make it happen. I can't see how they can go back on it and sort of welcome him in. The pictures from the training camp, he doesn't look particularly happy, and a lot of people are making a big thing about that.
Can you leave the body language expert for that? I'll analyze it later. I'll let you know how it looks, and I'll give you an analysis.
Let me know how that goes. Yeah,
I'll let you know. I'll give a proper analysis.
Mate, it should be done. It should be done. It should be. We move on to a new chapter. We find, and the good thing about this is we're going to find new leaders within the group, and I think that the new leaders within the group might change the hunger and might change the desire, because when you've been there and you've done it, it's hard to repeat that and go again. There'll be different characters in the squad now, maybe some surprise ones that step up and take us to somewhere different. It's just an end of an era. But this is, in terms of Henderson's era at Liverpool Football Club, it's an absolute mess. And the football club have got to do what they need to do to go into the season with everybody focused on the job in hand. And that right now we can't say that.
Con, I wanted to get your thoughts on the Henderson situation. We bloody speak every day, but I don't think we've had a chat about that. I don't know what you think. Are you... I know you're excited and you wanted to flash out like me and everything and all that, and you wanted change, total change. But is there a recent history of any team in world football that's gone through this much change, and especially dismantling a whole midfield and still come out the other side the following season, which is now, and being successful? Or do we, and if this happens, which Steve's saying is very likely, we get Dan's opinion on it as well, if it so happens that this is the case and we've flushed out the whole midfield, maybe And fans won't want to hear this, but again, it goes back to your thing. Like, what do we want then? What do we want? Do we want it all, or do we lower our expectations? Dare I say it? That's not my opinion. I'm just putting a question out. So before you start DMing me and saying, "Oh, I've changed my levels of expectation," I'm asking the question because is there an example in world football? I know some people gave the example of Napoli, who went through a few changes last season, but still came out brilliant. But there's not many more clubs that I can think of that gone through this much change.
Yeah, probably off the top of my head, no. But then again, I think in the Henderson situation specifically, Grizz, as Steve mentioned, he probably wasn't going to play, like he'd play a part, but he wasn't going to, I wouldn't say start in many games. Listen, circumstances happen. We all know that you get your opportunity.
But it's not just the playing, Conroy. It's the whole culture, leaders, Milner, Bobby, Fabinho, silent leader, but on the pitch type of. Do you know what I mean? It's like
no, I absolutely agree with that, and I think especially Henderson, Milner, you talk about having that kind of camaraderie, the culture in the dressing room. 100% agree with that, and I do think obviously that is a loss. But with regard to the situation we're in now,
show him some love, people. This guy's bored. No one's responding to him. Sorry, go on.
No, smash the likes. But as that being said, it's like I don't think like on the park initially, right? You'd be playing that much anyway, so that's a factor. I get the dressing room, I do, but it's getting to the point now where it's like, well, if it's going to happen, and Steve mentioned there's already been murmurs, rumors, more than that. It's probably now there's enough that's happened that they'll just get the deal done because they want to start afresh and go with that squad. For me, I think the actual thoughts on the transfer in general has been a weird one, to be honest. I actually always thought for some reason he'd probably go back to Sunderland. I thought that would be maybe the pathway for him, or maybe retired at Liverpool. Obviously, the money that he's been promised is from what we've read is generational wealth, life changing with an asterisk, because obviously footballers have quite a lot of money in general. I think I will add that, but again, if it's like 36 million a year tax free, that's like hundreds a year in advance family wealth. But again, for me, I think Steve mentioned about the Gerrard thing. I think that's been a big factor in it as well. Go over with Gerrard, do that, be part of the group and what's happening there. So I can understand it, but I've got to be honest. I think I felt quite strange because I know we're not going to go into details exactly, but what Henderson's like came out in the past and being a big support, the rainbow laces and all that, and going to a country where the past, especially for that as well. It's a weird one. It is a weird one. But when you just do it completely on, if you're sticking with the financial side of it and get more game time, I understand it. I do. But when you talk about, I remember Rio Ferdinand a couple of years ago when we just won the league, said it's vital, like the harmony they've got in that dressing room, the culture. There's you don't really hear much that ever gets leaked from the Liverpool dressing room, which I think when you compare that with Manchester United over the last couple of years was a big problem. And I think you never hear about us in that aspect. So it's been a great thing. So I would worry that harmony got lost. But I do think when you've got Klopp at the helm, Grizz, I think even whoever you bring in, I think he'll create that culture. And with regard to the leaders, that's the one thing I've not agreed with when I've seen the kind of panic on Twitter. You've got Holland, you've got Van Dijk, who's the captain of Holland. I think Gakpo was the captain of PSV before he left, or the vice captain. Robertson's seasoned captain for Scotland. You've also got players in there as well who will rise to the challenge. I've never always been for this thing, like see a quiet person, right? Gerrard's a prime example. He was a leader, but lead by example. But I'll be perfectly honest, I prefer a leader who's talking through the full game and actually geeing the troops up. That's the leader I look at, and I think we've got more than enough. And you guys go to more games at Anfield than myself, and you'll see that from that side of things. So with regard to the leader aspect, I'm not too concerned. I just worry about that harmony in the dressing room to keep everything in-house and keep it a good culture. That's the one worry I would have.
Dan, is there any way back for Jordan Henderson? And this is so not the way, if it's to be the end, he would have wanted, or us fans would have wanted. You can call him what you want and say what you want about his ability or whatever, or his current state now as a player, and his value to us. But he's been a fantastic captain. Surely this is not the way it should have ended, right? And what's your thoughts on the situation? I haven't had a chance to speak to you about it as well.
Yeah, it absolutely, first and foremost, shouldn't be the way it ends. He shouldn't just disappear under what would be a bit of a dark cloud, actually, if it does play out the way it appears like it might do. It's messy, so you used the word before, it's messy from top to bottom, really, the situation, quite frankly. But yeah, I think he deserved a Bobby-esque send-off, quite frankly, if not more, to be honest with you, given the captaincy. And he has absolutely led by example. He set the example at the club for a long time now. And I am concerned about that. My first sort of area of concern with this, and I sort of agree with the sentiment that he wouldn't have played a lot of football this season. I don't
100%.
think he wouldn't have been a starter. He would have been that James Milner role. But we still sang James Milner's praises for what he was able to do in and around the club whilst he wasn't playing much as well. And I think Jordan Henderson is that type of character. He's that type of leader. We still would have got the best out of him in that way. So it's a difficult one. In terms of if there's any way back, I don't believe there is, because I believe Jurgen Klopp exclusively wants players who want to be there. He's spoken before about players who want to push the train and not just jump on. He said that with Cody Gakpo, for example. And I think once somebody, despite how integral they are to the club and to the cause, once somebody's made it clear and made it known that they want out for whatever reason, I think that's pretty much it, personally. And listen, I could be proven wrong, especially with somebody like Henderson. I think that's why we've seen Fabinho sort of cast aside quite swiftly, actually. But yeah, I think there's too much water under the bridge with Jordan Henderson now. And I think what we might have to do is sort of rip the plaster off and just get it done. It won't be nice. It's going to be painful, but it might just have to happen now. I'm not happy about it because, listen, keeping hold of James Milner was not the answer. Whatever the question was this summer, that wasn't the answer, regardless of leadership. But at the same time, I wouldn't have wanted Henderson to go for that exact same reason. I think keeping him around and letting him, he knows the culture, he's been around, he can set the example, he can show these new lads the way. And I think that would have been a really important part of this rebuild, actually, quite frankly. But I also want to say, sort of on the leadership front, I'm actually not in total agreement with Conway on that. I'm slightly concerned, to be honest. And I wholly take the point about the leaders he's mentioned, and there could be lads to step up. I'm looking at Trent, especially, quite frankly, from that perspective. But we've just signed Hungary's captain too, so I'm fully aware that there are leaders, in inverted commas, in that group. I've never been convinced by Virgil van Dijk as a leader on the pitch, I must admit. His positions come into question as well, whether rightly or wrongly. That is a conversation. And Jordan Henderson's question, his position's always been under question. Like that's just been, he's been vilified throughout his career, so it never really matters. But Andy Robertson too, I think he's a brilliant leader, but there's a lot of questions going on about whether he should be playing next season in this new system. So we talk about Henderson not playing much and still being a captain. Robertson falls under the same bracket potentially. I am not convinced by any of the leaders that remain at the football club, quite frankly. None of them have shown me anything yet that compare even slightly to the way Jordan Henderson has captained this football club. And that's my stance on it. And I'm not a Jordan Henderson apologist. I think he was absolutely horrendous last season. But given what's left, that leadership-wise, I don't see it personally.
I think as a collective, I'm worried, because I'm a firm believer in the behind the scenes football culture that we don't see. So we see on the pitch, but the atmosphere and the standards that are set in training and in and around the club, you're almost like a teacher's pet, so to speak. You need a couple of teacher's pets, and Henderson and Milner were. Yeah. I'm not using that term in a derogatory manner, but it's a pathway to the hierarchy, to the management. And sometimes the manager doesn't need to hear a few squibbles here and there. And sometimes the leader or the captain can deal with these situations. And I think Bobby behind the scenes was very good at that. Obviously, we didn't see him on the pitch. He's a different type of leader. And we know Milner and Henderson most certainly like that. And then when you've got 3 or 4 new players coming in as well, I understand the trepidation. I have got that as well, to be honest with you. I'm not worried about it, but I would want it addressing. But I think it will be addressed, and getting away. And this is why business being done early is crucial to things like that I've just discussed. Because building that harmony and understanding and sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of letting people know what the hierarchy is. These are your go-to people in the dressing room. You look around, Virgil, Robertson, Trent even now possibly.
I think
I'm not
Salah
worried-
as well, Grace, to be honest. I think we should
Who?
mention Salah. I think we should mention
Salah, of
Salah in all
course.
of this, to be
I mean,
honest,
Salah absolutely has to stand up now. And even Konate, did you read his comments today and his interview today? Even he spoke about he almost spoke about sort of having more responsibility and having to step up. But there is always a concern when, as I said, when you've lost 7 and possibly 4 of them are like sort of first teamers, there's always you're gonna have that in the back of your mind, aren't you? Especially with 7 of those, 2 of those are the vice captain and captain.
Yeah, obviously you are, yeah. And I agree with Dan, and I said to you, Grizz, a couple of nights ago, I don't see Virgil van Dijk as a shoe-in for the captaincy. I think, first and foremost, Virgil van Dijk needs to address the flaws in his game rather than being leaders of others, if I'm being honest with you. Yes, he would be a leader in and around the club because he exudes that. He's got that aura about him, hasn't he? Everybody's always said it. Andy Robertson, I agree with Dan, he's a leader. I don't subscribe to the fact that there's a world where Andy Robertson is replaced by someone like a left-sided centre-back. How can a guy that has delivered what he's delivered and he's kind of the epitome of a Klopp player suddenly find himself not playing games of football? He is still in the conversation to be one of the best left-backs in the world. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. Even in a mad world where Chelsea decide they would sell us Colwill, I still don't think there's a world where Andy Robertson spends massive amounts of time on the bench because he's a Klopp man. He absolutely is everything that Klopp wants to be and is embodied in a pro footballer. There aren't any sort of real standout. There's no Graham Souness's and there's no Steven Gerrard's, there's no Jordan Henderson's within the squad. And I get that Szoboszlai is the Hungarian captain, and that might be just because he's simply the most high-profile footballer, arguably Hungary have ever had since Puskás. So you've got a player of that ability. You kind of want him to be the leader and drag people on, and be better than they are, because he's so good. He's so much better than everybody else. You can't give it to somebody else. Alisson's quiet. That worries me. Alisson is not a vocal guy. So whilst he exudes respect, he's not a man who's going to dish out a bollocking when it's needed. I think interesting one that Mo Salah's been mentioned. I think when things aren't going well, Mo Salah starts laughing at his mistakes and things like that. I don't think that is an environment where you would make that person a leader. He will be a leader because of his standards, and he'll be a leader because every single season he turns up and gets you 20 or 30 goals, and he's Mo Salah. So people will look at him and think, actually, I need to raise my game because I'm playing with this fella. But I don't see you going in at half time when you need a rallying call, like Istanbul, for instance, where key players stood up and said what they needed to say to get the job done. What worries me is I don't think we've got one of those, except for maybe Andy Robertson. But, excuse me, Andy Robertson's personality is a laugh and a joke personality. And that's a different type of leadership. You've got to knuckle down sometimes and look at people and see the whites of their eyes and challenge them. And I look at the group and I think, where's that coming from? I don't know at this stage. I really don't know.
It's a good question, actually. I might do a poll at some stage about that.
Just a quick one. The one thing I would say is I do think over the last couple of years, this notion that your captain has to start every game, I don't agree with it. I think there's been examples you've seen where either the club captain, they don't have to start every game. So let's say as a Robertson and Colwill comes in, it's about being that person there on and off the field. Company was probably the best first example of that. Played, I think, 10 games in that season, but it was a massive part. I would also say, look at Gundogan, who he came in and notorious, he's lifted the Champions League as the captain. No one would have said Gundogan became the captain of City. That was nailed on. So that means that someone can step up as well. No need to worry too much about it, because at the end of the day, football changes, stuff happens. Tomorrow's another day. If there's a space, someone will step up. If it's the people I've mentioned or someone else. But I think there's enough in that if they're starting or not starting, I think they will. I'd also say that, to be fair from my side, and I'm not saying it will be Robertson, but when he plays for Scotland, it is a different version. It isn't a laughing joke. It's a very serious captain. If you watch the form of that country recently, it's not a coincidence that him and Tierney's partnership, left centre-back and left-back, has been the best they've ever been at. So he can set that standard, but also actually be a vocal captain as well. I'm not saying it's going to be him. I just mean that when circumstances change, people step up. Trent's a good example, but then you might look at Trent and feel like, nah, not for me. Let him focus on his creativity. He's not a Gerrard. He's not the same person. There's a different mentality between both those players, and it might not suit him, or it might be the making of him to another level. We'll find out, but it'll be whatever happens, right? It'll be fine, I think. Someone will step up. But maybe I'm too optimistic. I can't believe I'm the most optimistic tonight. There's something.
This is amazing.
I've had a good day. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, this is amazing. Conroy's turned into the most optimistic read out of all of us.
Yeah,
Shall I tell you what I think? And as you guys were talking about it, I think you guys have raised a very good point. It wasn't part of the agenda, actually, but now that you've mentioned it, and I was thinking, right, while you were talking, I think it all depends on what kind of coach the team has as well. Because some coaches are quiet and not the leader types, tacticians, more into quietness and sort of, whereas our coach is synonymous with shouting and being a leader from the touchline and a man motivator. So I think we would be affected less than some other teams if our coach was quiet. For example, I don't know, give me an example of a quiet, methodical coach. I can't think right now, but you guys know what I mean, right? Our one is more Pep, Fergie, ranting and raving from the start, living the game. Carlo Ancelotti did. So if Carlo Ancelotti needs leaders, so Carlo Ancelotti would have needed leaders on the pitch and do the shouting for him. Our one does the shouting and everything. But I was thinking, now that he's the only left midfielder, is there a shout for Thiago Alcantara? I think he exudes leadership.
Not for me.
Well, that's that then. Move swiftly on. Not for him. We've got a few super chats to get through. People are panicking that they're not being read out. They will be read out. I like to segue. I like to sort of, you're interested. Don't you think the club should show ambition and try to sign De Jong to replace Fabinho? I rate De Jong very highly, but I don't know how that would be replacing Fabinho and ambition. I know what you're trying to say, but I don't think that's a like for like. Dave says, blew my first ever super chat because he's sending it to him. And he forgot to say what he wanted. Dave, ignore Steve's evil laugh. Tell us what you wanted to say and I'll read it out for you, son. Don't worry about it. Gana says, I'm so paranoid with FSG. I think that we're done in the transfer market as there won't be any incomings. By the way, what happened to Matheus Nunes? Listen, if there's no more signings, then I think most fan channels will close down their channels. They won't be able to handle the abuse and trolling and the heat. So there's absolutely no chance of no signing. So I know we've got sort of PTSD, but come on, man, not to that level. Ash says, big up Grizz. Henderson has clearly shown that we are his second choice, and I'm over it personally. I want it over and him gone. Something else that may be of note or significance, or maybe he had a dentist appointment or something, but Jordan Henderson wasn't present for the third team shoot, third kit shoot, Thursday, Friday, and he was scheduled to be because he is a Nike athlete, and it was in conjunction with Converse. So the Liverpool captain was supposed to be and should have been there, but he wasn't. Make of that what you will. I'm not saying anything after that. I'm just saying that. Philippe, our resident Newcastle fan, says, I remember when you scored 5 against United, Robertson was yelling, keep going. That's what you need. Leader in the team, pushing even when you're winning. And David comes back, says, Connery giving his best pitch for Robert. We know that. We know that.
I had to start that.
Dan mentioned that we knew that Conroy's going to have a dig back before the end of the show. We knew it was part and parcel.
By the way, can I just say, I actually think Robertson is the best leader that we've got.
I think so.
Like, I really do. But my only sort of, the reason I brought up him not starting is because I know when Henderson is leaving, people say it doesn't matter, he wasn't playing anyway. Like, so you can't have it both ways in a sense. Like, do you want your captain to play or not? And for me, I don't know about him playing thing. Him as a left-sided centre-back, I'm not convinced by it at all. And
it depends it depends if we pursue with that as the go-to formation.
Yeah.
And B, as of yet, we haven't brought in a left-sided centre-back.
No, of course. But for me, Steve makes the point about him being one of the best left-backs still around. Completely agree. Problem is, we don't play with a left-back when we play that formation.
So can I sort of jump in there a little bit? we're going to play differently. I've said with you down on shows at Redmen, and I've said with you Grizz on shows on here that with the signings we're making shows every sense of the way we're going to play more on the front foot. We're playing much more possession-based football. So in a side that was struggling to stop runners from midfield, Andy Robertson looks like a fish out of water, looks so lost in what we're trying to do. In a possession-based side with McAllister and Szoboszlai and Gakpo having two people near him in a midfield perspective, because we always had that horrible space in front of the midfield that Gakpo used to drop into to try and make things happen. Well, you're going to have a left and a right-sided guy playing in that position now.
And the intelligence as well of McAllister.
Yeah. So I think Liverpool become more like death by a thousand cuts type of football club than through absolutely rapid breakaway transition. I think we will see a lot more of the ball than we ever did before, which kind of allows Andy Robertson to grow into that role under pressure with Dewsbury Hall running off your midfield and scoring goals against you and things like that we'd seen. Then there's a problem with Andy Robertson playing on that left-sided centre-back thing. Us having a lot more of the ball and playing a lot more football and keeping the ball well. We spoke about this many times, all of us. Liverpool would have a shot at goal. They'd show the replay, or the team would have a shot against us rather. They'd show the replay, come back to the game. We'd already given the ball away. Yeah. So we were under pressure straight away. Those two guys, I think, will relieve a little bit of pressure. I think the dynamic of how we play goes from being built on a defensive cornerstone to being built on movement and possession of the football. And I think that can only help Andy Robertson.
We have 7 minutes left, and we have a few things to get through. First, this super chat, Queen Nadra, thank you. He says, is Pellegrini a good replacement for Fabinho or who's that?
It means Luis. It's Noah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dan. I was struggling there. So yeah, it comes down to basically our last 6-7 minutes are dedicated to. So then, what do we do now? So then we all to a man, I think, agree that Henderson is probably gone as well. That's Fabinho gone. That's Henderson gone. We knew the names being bandied about, which is again very strange for us. We don't have names being bandied out by the media and the same names at the same time and the same journalists. Like, how does that make sense? What's going on here? But Dan, if I'm asking you to give me two names, I'm sorry to put you on the spot like this, but because that's what we want to know now, because we're panicking. There's no light without the lighthouse. You need to shed some light onto what's going on here, because we can't go into the season with just Thiago, two newcomers, and Curtis Jones in effect. All right, Elliot, but do you know what I mean? Yeah. What do we do? Do we buy a project and a season starter? Do we buy two starters? Do we break the bank for one magnificent player? What's the tactics? What's the thinking?
Personally, I'd break the bank for one magnificent player, and that'd be my preference in all of this. I'd go and spend 80 million, 90 million, whatever it took to get a Caicedo, as Conway mentioned before. I actually think it was more of a Chelsea being close to the deal issue than a money issue, to be honest. That's the way I read it anyway. But I'd go get Caicedo, Tchouaméni at Real Madrid, but that's obviously not going to happen. We've all seen him liking Twitter posts about Liverpool, so that's not going to be a thing. But yeah, someone like that, quite frankly, that'd be my personal choice. Out of the four names, I'd do that and then probably sign. I don't know if I'd sign a young one or put the rest of the budget, depends what the budget is, on that left-sided centre-back. But I want both of them things. I want a front-line six, your left-sided centre-back, and a younger midfielder who can sort of watch and learn off whoever your six then is. But out of the four names that got mentioned, I think it was James Pearce who I seen mention him. It was obviously Calvin Phillips, Gravenberch, Romeo Lavia, and Sofian Amrabat. I would go and get Sofran Amrabat and Ryan Gravenberch.
Steve, what are you doing? We've got, is it 4 weeks? Someone told me to the start of the season. That has come around quick. It's not a long time. I'm
still processing the Sofran Amrabat shout from Dan, by the way.
There you go.
Only out of them four.
Yeah, I'm struggling. I think the issue with Gravenberch was always going to be, for me, that he'd be vying with Fabinho. And there's people out there saying he's not a defensive midfielder. He is. He played defensive midfielder for Ajax.
Not enough.
He only played slightly more advanced for Bayern Munich when he plays. He's never going to come to Liverpool to sit on the bench as a bit part squad player, because that's the problem at Bayern Munich, and that's why he's frustrated and wants to leave. So I think we buy a centre-back, not necessarily just to do the left-hand side. I think the drop-off from Konate and Van Dijk to what comes next is huge. And we need a body in there to give those guys a break, whether it's Robbo, whether it's Van Dijk, whether it's Konate, it doesn't matter for me. We need another body in there that's of a substantial standard, that the drop-off isn't huge. Lavia for 50 million makes no sense. It's crazy money for a guy that's had a great season, don't get me wrong, and shows loads of promise, but we don't need to sign players with loads of promise. We need to sign the finished article. If Liverpool faxed or emailed whatever Brighton tomorrow and offered £90 million for Caicedo, we're in negotiation for Caicedo. I don't see anything from any of the people who are out there writing about Chelsea that they're close. They're linked with him repeatedly. If you go and put £90 million on the table, you're in the conversation to buy him. So I'm with you, Dan, in that we should buy that one magnificent player, and then we buy a centre back that is better than the two that we dropped down to when our first choice pairing out there, or to give Robbo a break when he needs it, because he's still learning that role and he might not figure it out. And there might be a world where Andy Robertson's sort of 60 games a season comes under pressure. But I think that key player in midfield has to be a world class, or someone that can be world class quite quickly. But put your eggs in one basket and go big.
Conroy, last word, a couple of minutes.
Yeah, I think, Steve and Dan kind of summed it up for the Caicedo thing, or the kind of your big, Marquee signing. For me, I think because of the situation, as I mentioned earlier with Henderson, Fabinho, I think that could be vital. And I think, as Steve said, why don't you see how much they're willing to push? See if you put money on the table tomorrow, this week, and say, right, we're going to start with this and actually get the ball rolling, and then really see what the actual price is. For me, I would love that. And again, for the centre back, I think we can all agree Colwell's been spoken about a lot. He's been very impressive under 21's championship, and in general for Brighton, even against us in the FA Cup. I think he was brilliant. The thing is, for me, the Colwell one stands out, as I feel like if you could get someone like that in, I think you can justify that is for the long run. Like, that could be your replacement to Virgil van Dijk. That could allow him to come in, also kind of play that left centre-back role as well. For me, that would be the one. I think realistically, they're both not going to happen. But if you're asking to choose between one right now, I'll back what I said earlier. I think Caicedo or something like that. I understand. For me, 19-year-old Lavia, it's going up to 50 million. I'm just really struggling the concept of that when you got Bacetić last year, who's just a year younger. And I just feel like we're putting a lot of money into potential, whereas we really, if you just put a 20 more million, and you could.
I don't want to be. I do actually. I'm naughty like that. Did you guys know? Lavia. Caicedo has played only 13 games more than Lavia.
Yeah, I think I saw that. But Chris, you can just tell with Caicedo, it was like,
I get it. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. To a Moises Caicedo, for me. Do you remember, guys? We were speaking pre-Jude. We were talking in December and January time, and I said Moises Caicedo for me is probably on a par, or maybe just under, in terms of wanting Jude. Like, that's how much I rate Moises Caicedo. Magnificent player. And more so now, in terms of no Fabinho, he's absolutely ideal. After, of course, Tchouaméni, who's just doesn't want to come to us. So stop talking about him, people. Yeah, I'm with you guys. I don't know who that ready-made player is. I know we've made inquiries on Paulina. I like Paulina. I know Dan was nodding his head with Paulina.
I like him as well, Chris. I
like him. I genuinely like him. Of course, the price has to make sense, and what they're asking 70 million, that doesn't make sense. I'm excited. I'm nervous. But that's what's part and parcel of being a Liverpool fan or any football fan. I think the pictures from Germany, people have started commenting on sort of facial expressions and formations today. Someone's talking about Szoboszlai was sort of seen on the left of the eights, and McAllister on the right. So people are reading into that what they want. But this is what preseason is about. I think the excitement, the buzz is back. We needed it back after the last season that we endured. We needed new fresh faces. We're going to have new fresh faces. We didn't anticipate some of the departures that we're probably going to get. But again, it adds to the Liverpool 2.0 under Klopp 2.0, because I think that's very important as well. Not only Liverpool, but Klopp sort of having a fresh outlook and looking to rebuild as well. Guys, thank you so much for your time as usual, as per. Cav sends his apologies. I don't know what happened to his wife. I'll find out who his providers are. We'll have serious words. We'll write angry tweets about them, about his suppliers. That should do the trick. Write angry tweets about them. But thank you very much, guys. This has been REDFELLAS on a Sunday night. We've enjoyed your company. Hope you've enjoyed us. Take care. See you very soon.